there's any number of things that we could do to revive poetry, but it seems to me, if you could only say two things, I would say this, that poetry needs to recover some of the cultural territory that we've given to fiction, to popular music and the movies. The storytelling and the psychological complexity and realism of fiction, the lyricism and eroticism of popular music, and the kind of emotional immediacy and the sheer pleasure of movies. And that seems to me the big picture. There's a lot of wonderful little things we can do, but that's what the artists can do. The other thing is, it does seem to me, is that we have to re-engage poetry with spiritual life. There is, depending on the person, and I think this is almost everybody I meet, the students I meet, either a kind of hunger or a kind of almost blankness, an anesthesia that they feel, that they are not being fed by the society in which we live. So I've sort of picked a couple of poems, that are like that. The first is the title poem. I'm going to, at some point, write a jazz song cycle with a wonderful pianist named Helen Sung. I don't know if you know her work. She's just a terrific jazz pianist. And the question is, jazz song cycles, that's cool, doesn't it? I mean, that's really cool. But both Helen and I admitted that we didn't know what the hell it meant. And so I said, well, let me write a poem and see if this is the kind of thing that we are after. I wanted something that was as transparent as a popular song. And I also wanted something that the way that popular songs do, they use slang that people use, expressions that people use, and use them for lyric ability. It's called Pity the Beautiful. Pity the beautiful, the dolls and the dishes, the babes with big daddies, granting their wishes. Pity the pretty boys, the hunks and Apollos, the golden lads whom success always follows, the hotties, the knockouts, the 10s out of 10, the drop-dead gorgeous, the great leading men. Pity the faded, the bloated, the blousy, the paunchy Adonis whose luck's turned lousy. Pity the gods, no longer divine. Pity the night, the stars lose their shine. This is the last poem in the book. It's a personal poem, but I think it's a universal experience among people so unfortunate to have had the experience, which is that my wife and I lost our first child, when he was only 4 months old. And thereafter, every time we would see a child that was born around the same time, we began, in a sense, to track our son's life, through this. And your child has sort of a phantom life, and you can't meet a kid that's like the same age without kind of noticing that. And that's about this experience. I wrote this poem for his 21st birthday, Majority. Now you'd be 3, I said to myself, seeing a child born the same summer as you. Now you'd be 6 or 7 or 10. I watched you grow in foreign bodies, leaping into a pool, all laughter, or frowning over a keyboard, but mostly just standing, taller each time. How splendid your most mundane action seemed in these joyful proxies. I often held back tears. Now you are 21. Finally, it makes sense that you have moved away into your own afterlife. Now pretend you're not hearing a poem. Just pretend you're hearing a story. This is a monologue. It is, all spoken by the same character, except for the first 3 lines. And this is the person who's actually heard the story, and he's essentially framing it. But from then on, it's simply the person speaking. I don't think it needs any notes. It's a ghost story. that you'll realize is more than a ghost story. And it's a little bit like a Henry James story with more sex and booze. Haunted. The first 3 lines are in italics. This is the listener. "I don't believe in ghosts," he said. "Such nonsense. But years ago, I actually saw one." He seemed quite serious, and so I asked. It happened almost 40 years ago. The world was different then, not just for ghosts. Slower, less frantic. You're too young to know life without cell phones, laptop, satellite. You didn't bring the world with you everywhere. Out in the country, you were quite alone. I was in love with Mara then, if love is the right word for that particular delusion. We were young. We thought we could create a life made only of peak moments. We laughed, we drank, we argued and made love. Our battles were Homeric. Not Homer's heroes, but his gods. Petty, arrogant Olympians, thundering in their egotistic rage. Mara was brilliant, beautiful, refined. She'd walk into a room dressed for the evening and I would lose a breath. She seemed to shine the way movie stars shine, made only of light. And did I mention she was rich and cruel? Do you know what it's like to be in love with someone bad? Not simply bad for you, but slightly evil. You have to decide either to be the victim or accomplice. I'm not the victim type. That's what she liked. I envied her sublime self-confidence. She could freeze someone with a single sentence, too witty to be rude, but deeply wounding, impossible to deflect or forget. If I sound slightly bitter, please understand it is myself I now despise, not Mara. She simply recognized what I desired. Her uncle owned a house up in the Berkshires, not just a summer house, a country manor, 3 stories high with attics, basement, turrets, surrounded by great lawns and sunken gardens, hundreds of wooded acres, whispering wealth. We came up for a few days in late autumn, driving through bare woods under a gray sky, the landscape still, no birds, barely a breeze, hushed as the hour after heavy snowfall. The house had been vacated since September. I had imagined it as dark and gothic, cloaked in shadow like something out of Lovecraft. But the decor was opulently cozy, a proper refuge for a robber baron, stuffed with objets to certify his status, though slightly shabby from a century's youth. The art was grand, authentic, second-rate. Florentine bronzes, Belgian tapestries, carved stonework pride from bankrupt Tudor manors, and landscapes by the minor Barbizon. Nothing quite fit together. I suspect sumptuous excess was the desired effect. A joyful shout to celebrate success. Good taste be damned. Let's just indulge ourselves and revel like a child who greets his playmates by emptying his toy chest on the floor. What good is wealth if no one notices? Mara seemed to think so. What did I know? I'd never seen the rich up close before. While Mara showered, I explored the cellars, searching a maze of mildewed storage rooms until I found a faux medieval door flanked by a pair of somber wooden saints. You should have seen the wine her uncle owned. 6 vaulted rooms stocked with the great estates, Chateau Margaux, La Tour, Lafite Rothschild, a prodigal accumulation formed on such a scale he could have entertained Napoleon and half the Grande Armée. I chose 2 bottles of pre-war Petrus that probably cost as much as my month's rent. Clutching their dusty necks, I closed the door and told the saints I could get used to this. They didn't condescend to give an answer. That night, we drank in the high-paneled library, a great inferno blazing in the fireplace. Naked Diana stood in tapestry above us on the wall. Below her, Mara, stylishly overdressed, refilled our glasses. Resplendently, the room reminded us that beauty always bears a heavy price. White tiger skins lay stretched across the floor, martyred Sebastian twisted on the pedestal. Even the dusty books were bound with leather. Mara loved having me as audience. She sat there, half illumined by the fire and half in shadow, spinning out long stories. They were as fine as anything in books. No, they were better because they were true. She was a connoisseur of schadenfreude and was especially wicked in describing her former lovers, imitating them, cataloging their signature stupidities, and relishing their subsequent misfortunes. I'm surely in her repertory now. At first I was embarrassed by her candor. I felt more like a confidant than lover, but gradually I understood her motive. Even she needed someone to impress. Life was a contest. Mara was a champion. What good was winning if no one noticed? Of course, that night, we drank too much and argued. She strode off, slamming doors theatrically. I sat still, slowly finishing my drink, feigning indifference, just as she would have, and then went off to the other wing to sleep. Let her find me, I thought. Let her apologize. She won't like sleeping in this house alone. The room was cold, and I was too annoyed to fall asleep. I stretched out on the bed, still wearing all my clothes, and tried to read. Believe it or not, the book was Shakespeare's sonnets. What sweeter text for wounded vanity? Farewell, thou art too dear for my possessing. I'd found an old edition in the library, and from sheer spitefulness, I'd stolen it. That night, each poem seemed written just for me. What is your substance? Whereof are you made, that millions of strange shadows on you tend? I hope this explanation makes it clear I wasn't sleeping when I saw her enter. Mara, I thought, mad at being ignored, coming to make a scene. But no, it was a handsome woman in her early 40s. I thought she might have been a housekeeper coming in from town to check up on the place. But why was she so stylishly dressed? I started to explain why I was there. She didn't seem to hear and turned away. Could she be deaf? I didn't want to scare her. Something was wrong. I couldn't see her clearly. She seemed at once herself and her own reflection, shimmering on the surface of clear water where fleeting shadows twisted in the depths. I found it hard admitting what I had seen. She seemed to be a ghost, though that sounds crazy. Oddly, I wasn't scared, just full of wonder, watching this thing I knew could not exist, this woman standing at her dressing table, translucent, insubstantial, but still there, and utterly oblivious of me. First to be haunted, then to be ignored. Her back toward me, she started to undress. Now I was panicked and embarrassed both. I spoke much louder. She made no response. Now wearing only a long silk chemise, she turned toward me, still strangely indistinct, the fabric undulating as if alive. I felt her eyes appraise me, and I sat half paralyzed as she approached the bed. Here I was, face to face with a dead soul, some entity regathered from the dust, returned like Lazarus from the silent tomb, whose mere existence right before my eyes confounded my belief there could not be an afterlife. Think of what this meeting represented: a skeptic witnessing the unexplained. I could have learned the secrets of the dead if there are any secrets, which I doubt. So how did I address this revenant, this traveler from the undiscovered country who stared at me with dark, unblinking eyes? I caught my breath, got on my feet, and said nothing at all. The words stuck in my throat. We stood there, face to face, inches apart. Her pale skin shined like a window catching sunlight, both bright and clear but chilling to the touch. She stared at me with undisguised contempt. And then she whispered, almost in a hiss, "You don't belong here. No, you don't belong here." She slowly reached to touch me, and I ran, leaving behind both Shakespeare and my shoes. Mara was still awake when I arrived. The lamp was on, the fireplace ablaze, and she stretched naked under satin sheets. She could never resist striking a pin-up pose. "So you've come back." She yawned with mock ennui, and then added with a smirk, "You weren't gone long." I didn't say a word of what I'd seen. We used to sleep in one another's arms, our two slim bodies interlaced like hands. That night I held her, feeling our hearts beat, first hers, then mine, always out of sync. And in the dark, I thought, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. Slipping out of bed, I quickly dressed, and what I couldn't wear, I left behind. The clothes, the books, the camera, no longer mine. What a surprise to first feel the liberations of divestiture. I moved with such new lightness down the stairs, watched by mute saints and marble goddesses. Then out the door, I closed it quietly. The lock clicked shut. Goodbye to both my ghosts. I made it to the county road by dawn and hitched a ride on an old dairy truck. "What happened to your shoes?" the driver said. "No, better yet, don't tell me. Just get in." I climbed in, and one road led to another, and now I'm in your bar. That's probably not the story you expected from a monk, delivering brandy from the monastery. Not all of us began as altar boys. I've been there 15 years. I like the drill. Poverty, chastity, and growing grapes. The Archbishop calls my port a miracle. Don't tell His Grace, but I still doubt there is an afterlife. That's not why I stay there. This is the life I didn't want to waste. I'm going to end with a love poem. It's about two things. It's about why we need to tell stories, because the way we live is to constantly update the story of our life. As our circumstances change, our stories change. Life is a literary challenge. That's why everyone needs literature from the earliest age, because you have to understand the multiplicity of plots, the legions of characters, the rescues, the reversals, even the deus ex machina that could happen in your life. The second is, I think that love, especially married love, true, deep, romantic, erotic love, is mostly conversation. It's, in a sense, having somebody that you have to wrap your own story around, and you know that you're in love with someone if something isn't entirely real until you tell your beloved. I take the title from Shakespeare, who in Theseus, in Midsummer Night's Dream, says, "The lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination all compact," which is to say, all three of them are crazy. But in their craziness, they see things in the world that sane people miss. It's a double sonnet. and it's in a form I invented of 7, 7, 7, and 7, where there's a turn with each stanza. The lunatic, the lover, and the poet. The tales we tell are either false or true, but neither purpose is the point. We weave the fabric of our own existence out of words, and the right story tells us who we are. Perhaps it is the words that summon us. The tale is often wiser than the teller. There is no naked truth but what we wear. So let me bring this story to our bed. The world, I say, depends upon a spell spoken each night by lovers unaware of their own sorcery. In innocence or agony, the same words must be spoken, or the restless moon will darken in the sky, the night grow still, the winds of dawn expire. And if I'm wrong, it cannot be by much. We know our own existence comes from touch, the new soul summoned into life by lust, and love's shy tongue awakens in such fire, flesh on flesh and midnight whispering, as if the only purpose of desire were to explore its infinite unfolding. And so, my love, we are two lunatics, secretaries to the wordless moon, lying awake together or apart, transcribing every touch or aching absence into our endless, intimate palaver, body to body, naked to the night, apparelled only in our utterance. Thank you.